All right. I see tissues. Yeah. History teaches us rich lessons, and it reminds us of who we are and where we came from. For me, this film is a prime example of Black excellence, Black legacy, but most important, Black joy. One of my favorite ideas around the film is really this mindset of decolonizing the mind, reclaiming our narrative, sharing our joy and our history. And today, we have some wonderful members of the Ralph Lauren family and participants in the film joining us. We have Valerie Jarrett, Director of Ralph Lauren Board of Directors and CEO of the Obama Foundation. Please join me. We have James Jeter, Creative Director, Concept Design, and Brand Direction for Men's Polo, Ralph Lauren. We have Cole Brown, writer, producer, director, and director of A Portrait of the American Dream, Oak Bluffs. And last but not least, we have Dr. David Wall-Rice, Crown Forum Endowed Professor and Chair of the Department of Psychology at Morehouse College. It is wonderful to have you here as living legacy, living excellence, and most important, living joy. So thank you. So before we get into today's conversation, I wanted to share some background. A few years ago, Ralph Lauren released its first collaboration with Morehouse and Spelman. Morehouse and Spelman. Okay. Which was the first collegiate collection and collaboration, and the first campaign featuring an all-Black cast. James, let's rewind. You were there from the beginning. This was your creation. Can you talk to us about what inspired you and why Ralph Lauren decided to pick that narrative back up in this time through the lens of Oak Bluffs?
Absolutely. So first, I'd like to thank everyone for being here. The reason why this is so successful is because folks like you are showing up, and it really means the world. So thank you first and foremost. Also, I just wanted to thank the Kellogg Foundation for your partnership, and not only with Ralph Lauren, but everything you do in the world to make it a better place. We also have a lot of incredible participants from the film that have joined us from the film as well as the campaign. So I just want to thank you all for being here, because this is really your story. And we wouldn't be here without you. So thank you for your vulnerability, and thank you for trusting us. To the Morehouse and Spelman and crew as well, thank you so much for your partnership on this film. It really gives it a grounding and a credibility that we really needed. And so I just wanted to start by that. And so if we rewind, sort of 5 years ago at Ralph Lauren, we were having these really amazing, vulnerable, courageous conversations all around our company. And one of the primary questions that we were all asking is, what is our role as a brand in portraying the American dream to the world? Ralph Lauren is one of the most, if not the most iconic American brand in the world. And with that comes a responsibility of how we portray Americana. And so in 2020, we had some really incredible conversations with Ralph about ways in which we portrayed that dream. We really started with some of our design sensibilities as we think about what our brand is known for: collegiate style, the Northeast, coastal living, things of that sort. And we landed on Ivy League style. And through that, we were able to share images with Ralph of yearbook photos from Morehouse and Spelman colleges that really showed a parallel between a lot of what we had been inspired by from Ivy League schools that also existed in the same history books at HBCUs. And that really, I think, planted a seed that then budded into the collaboration with Morehouse and Spelman that happened back in 2022. As we continued that conversation, we thought, well, what are other points on our compass? What are other design sensibilities that we can look at to continue to expand our portrayal of the American dream? And we thought about everything, the West, quilting, the Northeast, other HBCUs. But as we did and dug into more and more research, Oak Bluffs was the answer. I mean, it continued to come out on top as we thought about the bridge from collegiate style to these other safe spaces that exist in American culture. And it's really through research that we did through our Design with Intent team, Dara Douglas, who leads that team along with Sasha Kelly, also a Spelman graduate who partnered very closely with the team in leading this. We came up to the island and we dug through family photos and we reached out to people like Lee Van Allen and Joyce Graves and Jocelyn Coleman. And the more and more research that we did, the more and more we fell in love with this incredible place. I mean, it really is one of a kind. I think one of the things that we did notice, though, that it was actually quite difficult to find as much research as we were looking for. And so there's some things online, there's some things in the Smithsonian, but it's not as much as you would think. And so I think as we started to do that research, we were welcomed into people's homes, and they opened up their family albums, and we were literally going through boxes of archival on living room tables. And what we discovered were these traditions that happened on this island, like 5 to 7s, which Joyce Graves was so kind enough to explain to us. And her father was a photographer on the island, and a lot of the images that you see in this campaign really come from the archival of the families that have lived on this island for generations, as well as some that are new as well. And it shows the through line between what folks were doing 120 years ago, sitting on porches, hanging at the beach, continues today. And it became evident and clear that these safe spaces and these really beautiful kind of interesting pockets of American culture, a lot of times stories that have been untold on the main stage needed to be told. And I think it helped to also expand our portrayal of the American dream and our brand heritage. And so again, there's been incredible writers and books and a lot that has been said about this island, but it was amazing for us at Ralph Lauren to be able to take that and serve that as inspiration, which very closely aligns with our brand DNA as well as our purpose, which is to inspire the dream of a better life through authenticity and timeless style. And to me and to the team, there was no better place that really embodied that principle.
Thank you. So Cole, as you hear James talk about the impetus and the design ideas and how this all came together, as the director and someone who's lived and grown up on the island, how did you come to think about creating this short film? And what was the message that you really wanted to convey?
Yeah, I mean, it's so crazy being in this room, I gotta tell you. Like, we worked so hard on this, and I think that from an external perspective, this could look like a brand campaign, but there's nothing more personal and more intimate than this story to so many of the people that are involved. And I look in this audience and I see these faces, and it's hard for me not to get emotional, to be honest. So James came to me, a little over a year ago, saying that he wanted to do this. And I think that from the very beginning, to his credit and to everybody at Ralph Lauren's credit, exactly what Ms. Jarrett said in the story, we wanted to begin by listening. We wanted not to enter with an agenda of sort of what this story was meant to be. And despite the fact that I've come my entire life, so much of the richness of this history I was not familiar with. And then you speak with someone like Miss Van Allen, who is here. You speak with someone like Miss Coleman, who is here, Miss Graves, who is here, people whose legacies on this island are as rich and special and long-standing as any corner of this country. And you realize that, I always knew this was special, and I knew it was deserving of something like this. So this is not an element of validation, but to see so much of the world recognize what I have always known to be an incredibly special community is gratifying nonetheless. So it's really, to say that this is intimate, when I look at that screen, actually a comment that I keep getting is we thought you hired models. It's no, there are a couple, but the vast majority of the people in those images are just like my village. And we are really that beautiful. It is really that special. And that is just so special to me. So I couldn't be more gratified.
And thank you for sharing your joy with us.
Thank you.
So Valerie, you show up prominently in the film. You spent a childhood on this island. From your perspective, and the perspective of being someone who has generational history here, as well as a director on the Ralph Lauren board, can you talk to us a little bit around the role that brands like Ralph Lauren play in telling these stories and the importance of brands like Ralph Lauren continuing to share this experience?
Thank you. First of all, good afternoon, everyone. It is very emotional. I'm trying not to look at my cousins over here because I'll start to cry, right? I mean, it is truly emotional. And so first of all, I'm so proud to be associated with this iconic company. And I don't just say brand because we are much more than a brand. It's a company started by one person who had this incredible vision and started selling like one tie. And to have turned that one tie into this extraordinary enterprise and to have an opportunity to be associated with it makes me so proud. But I will tell you, my pride grew far deeper when we produced the first line with the partnership with Morehouse and Spelman. And the reason why is that not only did we listen to all the people who helped educate us about the experience, but Ralph selected the two people who actually attended those schools to be completely and entirely immersed in its creation. And he is our creative director. He designs everything. And for him to turn that over to Dara and to James spoke volumes. And he said, I trust you to do this. And then they went out and did the listening and came up with this incredible film and this wonderful line that sold out immediately, just like this one did. And the only thing that I would do differently is produce a lot more stuff, because I know y'all are disappointed when you go online and you can't find it. And it didn't start out as a commercial enterprise. It started out as a way for us to express our values to this incredibly rich, diverse population that we value. And I think it was a way of saying thank you, but it was also a way of saying we're going to take this extraordinary company and use its platform to lift up stories that do not get told often enough. And those are our stories. But to come kind of full circle back to the Vineyard, part of why I got so emotional is my cousin Tony, who's here, she and I grew up coming here since we were 10. But to hear her daughter Jackie share how important this experience was for her, and hear her talk about her grandfather, Pop, and just what it meant to her, Jackie, it is our legacy. The fact that you love this place as much as Tony and I love this place, and that my grandchildren just left and they went to flying horses just like I went to flying horses and my daughter went to flying horses. That continuation of our story has not been told in this way ever before. And now it is on the international stage. And that makes me very proud.
Thank you. David, one of the themes that stood out to me was the safe spaces and the creation of safe spaces for the Black community to be able to live, survive, and thrive. And we know in incredible times like the 60s, like we're in right now, that safe spaces are more important than ever. Can you talk to us a bit about how the model of safe spaces in HBCUs, where families sent their children because they wanted them to be educated, but more importantly, they wanted them to be safe because they were their most precious thing. Can you talk about how that transfers to the families and the experience here in Oak Bluffs?
I can try. I can try. First of all, like everybody else, I want to take a personal point of privilege and say what an amazing opportunity it is to be here. Shelley said if you came to the Vineyard once, then you're a Vineyarder. I don't consider myself a Vineyarder, even though I've come here for like over 30 years. My connection here, I'm an only child, is to my God family. My God sister's in the front row right there. She's also an only child. We're very, very close. And I get emotional around this because it's my family creating a safe space for me, right? And it's not being a safe space from the hood or, getting shot up or anything like that. I actually remember when I finished Morehouse College and I was going to graduate school and my godmother was like, we have a house up there. And I was like, I don't want to be around all these sedity folk. I'm not trying to, that's not where I'm like. I mean, 21st La Brea, LA. I mean, I was there, right? And she was like, Negro, is there anywhere else you can go on vacation for free? I was like, it's a really good point, right? And so around those, the import of safe spaces, and I really like this, what Otis Moss III said about decolonizing the Black imagination and this idea of Black joy. I think all of those things are bound in this opportunity to just be. What is it like to have a space where you are, of course, protected and all of those things, but where you can just be yourself, where you can make mistakes, where you can be excellent, but you can be excellent with compromise, you can trip up and be around family and stuff like that. I mean, those things are so very important. And I think that, a testament to what this campaign and what this company has done is it's allowed us to look at where and how we are complicated as people and certainly as Black folk. It was interesting when we were doing the interviews and whatnot, and it's curious to see all the connections and all that stuff. Andrew Dibble actually snuck me into a party with the Obamas that I thought was wild. And I see all the people in this room. I saw Valerie Jarrett there, who doesn't know me from Adam. I saw, all kinds of folks there. And then I saw the Obamas walk in. And Obama, I was like, Mr. President, you just spoke at our commencement, not too long ago. He was like, oh, you're a professor at Morehouse College. I was like, yeah, I am. He was like, well, what do you teach? And I was like, oh, snap, I teach psychology. He's like, well, tell those guys at Morehouse I said hello. And I was like, get out of here. I was like, this is crazy. And I remember getting on the phone and calling my mother up and my dad. And I was like, I just met the President of the United States and Poison was playing in the background and BBD and that. I was like, it was wild. And the thing about it is that it was a safe space. It was a protected space for the folks who were in that room where this guy could sneak in. I mean, I was a college professor and all the stuff then, but still, I got snuck in and, all that kind of stuff. And it was just amazing. And I think that for us to be able to be unapologetic about the spaces that we're allowed to and that we've earned the right to show up in is so important. I know that there's a lot of conversation, of course, on the interwebs and whatnot around elitism and all of that exists on this island, which is true. But what does it mean to be in elite spaces and protected spaces? And then what does it mean to be elitist, to separate yourself and other yourself? And so I think that's something that's important for us to pay attention to as we are in these privileged spaces. What are our responsibilities, right? So I think we had so many interviews that we went through, and I quite honestly was crazy uncomfortable at first. I trust James Jeter. I was able to work with him on the first campaign, and I don't trust him blindly, but I trusted him, and I showed up, and all these these pretty people from your neck of the woods I'm like, man, what's going on? We're in front of the Shearer Cottage and all this kind of stuff, and I'll tell you that my plug was Miss Lee Van Allen. We were on the steps and we were talking, and I was like, this is what it looks like when I come up to the island. I mean, I'm able to sneak into parties and stuff like that, but this isn't what it looks like. It looks like me going to this house and being by myself and walking on the beaches and having my son, my oldest son, Biko, is here, and my younger son being able to have spaces where they can go to Circuit Avenue and be safe. But I don't know all this sedity stuff. And Miss Van Allen said, this space is what you make it. Your space and your ability to be is just as important as all of these other things. And she was talking about how important it was to be in the space. And because I have a shared history in terms of Hampton and Virginia and my family being from Portsmouth and Richmond and whatnot, to see how it is that Shearer Cottage came to be was so important. And I think this idea of understanding our history and how we show up in a space is so important in terms of protecting those safe spaces that we are entitled to and that we've earned.
Thank you. Cole, as we think about legacy and safe spaces and narrative and the power of film, can you talk to us a bit around what that experience was like for you to bring forward this narrative that's going to continue to build upon the legacy and that's going to actually inform generations to come around the importance of having communities like Oak Bluffs?
I mean, it's such an honor. I think it's impossible to talk about this project and not acknowledge the fact that we're in a time when many of our stories are going untold and outright erased. And I will say that the fact that that was never even a discussion that we had, that it was always, this is so clearly tied to the way that this brand, Ralph Lauren, talks about America, speaks volumes about the team that I was working with, I had the privilege of working with. And it is an honor, a privilege, a responsibility when you have a chance to tell the story of sort of your own creation in some ways, right? Like I am a stitch in this fabric, and it will exist well beyond me, and other people, and it should be acknowledged that like we look to Stanley Nelson's documentary and other people that have told this story before, but it very much felt like just because of the platform that we had been provided, this was a moment where we had an opportunity to tell the story and synthesize it for a new generation. And that comes with joy and pressure. I mean, James and I had a lot of conversations where I was like, James, we can't screw this up because I got to go live with these people. If this goes south, I'm still showing up in August. And so I think that speaks to how diligently we approach this process. I mean, not only did we spend a lot of time up here, we built relationships with the people who comprise this story, who have been here in some sense since the very beginning of this story. And I think what you saw, and was very intentional in the film, was trying to tell a generational story from the beginning to the end. So trying to begin with, our heritage, but by the end, being able to look forward and seeing a hopeful way that this could continue well into the future. So legacy, responsibility, duty was something that was at the front of our mind at every possible step. And in case this is the last time I get the mic, I want to briefly say, Dara Douglas has been shouted out, and I don't know if she's here, but she was incredible and should be acknowledged. And then Joshua Renfro was here. Raise your hand. Josh was the art director. And none of this happens without the team that came together. And it was a team of, frankly, just young, creative Black folk that were empowered to tell a story that was important to us. And it was really special.
Thank you. So, James, this is ultimately a fashion brand. Can you talk to us a bit around the style, the design standpoint, where you found inspiration behind the beautiful clothes that we see behind us, and how does style play a role in identity and self-expression?
Sure. Ralph would always say that it was never about the clothes, and I really love that. I mean, it's a vehicle to tell stories, but it's not really about the clothes. I mean, the clothes are fun, and I think we use them as a form of self-expression, but if you think about the polo shirt, it's not about going out on a horse and being an equestrian and riding, playing polo. It's more so about what it represents and what it's emblematic of. And I think in a lot of ways, the same is true with this product and this project. Clothing also has a really interesting way of telling stories, and is also a way to build upon narrative. And so a lot of the clothing that you see here on the stage look to do just that. The shirt over there with the images on them are actually images from Joyce Graves' father's collection. And in the past, in our history, we've had something called diary prints, where you would have these images, archival images of families on these shirts, but they were never families from sort of communities like this, and we were able to reframe that through the context of Oak Bluffs. The same is true with the quilt and the patchwork. Quilting is another form of communication, and there's a deep, rich history within the Black community of quilt makers. Also, all around the island, on these beautiful cottages and porches, you see quilts and things that feel a little, as Dean Carter said, folky. And we have things like Polo Country. It's uncontrived. It's an heirloom. It's something your grandmother hand-stitched and passed down. And so when I see a quilt jacket like that, that's sort of the thinking behind that. It's not really about the clothes, but about maybe the relationship that you have with your grandmother. And then we were able to be a little bit more creative. And so that Martha's Vineyard jacket with the map of the island on it is really a Sukajan jacket, a tour jacket. And it was just really fun to just, dream and play and just like, what's some cool stuff that we want to wear, that we want to buy. And I'd be remiss to say I was also extremely fortunate to really inherit a lot of these icons from this incredible brand. I mean, this is stuff that Ralph has been doing from the beginning. And I think, the other side of that coin is you can have a vision and pass it off to someone, but it actually takes human beings to go out and make it great and make it beautiful and make it nuanced. And so everything you see up here is only beautiful because there's an incredible team behind us that really took the time to make this a really big deal. This isn't just another collection. It's not just another shirt. It's something that folks really spent a lot of time on. And so it was also interesting to kind of bridge the gap between the schools and the island. When you're on the island, you see kids up here wearing their Morehouse sweatshirts or their Spelman sweatshirts or Tuskegee or Georgetown or Columbia or, wherever they went. And there's something really interesting about these kind of collegiate apparel with the cedar shingle backdrop, seeing like a collegiate sweatshirt with a cottage in the back. And that's something that you see all the time around this island. And so we were able to lean in a little bit with that in the product. And so like the Spelman patchwork cardigan is reminiscent of a quilt or a sampler sweater, but we were able to design it through the lens of a collegiate sweater. And then what Cole is wearing here is, this beautiful hand-embroidered chore jacket, which again, just tells stories. It's almost like signing your signature in a yearbook your senior year. And so if you know this island, you'll recognize a lot of the things on that jacket. So it's not about the clothing. It's not about the clothes, but if it were, the team did an amazing job in still telling story through product.
Thank you. So I'm going to switch gears a little. And Valerie, you've worked a long time with the Kellogg Foundation and being a director on the board for Ralph Lauren. And you often talk to us about the power of narrative change embedded in racial healing and the healing role that safe spaces have for communities. Can you talk to us about how Oak Bluffs brings that alive for families today?
That's a really good question. Well, look, we all come from somewhere else, except for the few of you who actually live on the island. And so we come here with our stories, with our experiences, both positive and negative. But I think we're drawn here for the theme that you've heard throughout, which is this place where you feel safe, where you don't feel like somebody included you, you feel like you belong. And that's a different thing. Including is I give you permission to come in. Belonging is I belong here just like everybody else belongs here. And so I think to have this as a way of centering us and giving us a common set of experiences, we all go back to our regular lives once we leave vacation, but the experiences that we have and the feeling of closeness and connection and same time next year, and the routines that we establish here that we pass on from generation to generation, I find replenishing. I hope y'all would agree. When I leave here, I'm like, I can do anything. And it's because you can let your hair down, you can relax, you can breathe, you can, this is just dressy. Well, you'll see me a little later, a little more dressy. But I mean, for me to come out of my flip-flops is a lot because you can just be yourself and do what makes you. Everybody can figure out what on this amazing island makes you feel ready to go back and do what you have to do. And I think part of how we continue at a time where, let's face it, a lot of us are a little nervous and scared and worrying what's going to happen. But then you listen to this and you see this film and you look at these amazing pieces of clothing that weave together those stories and you go, wait a minute, I'm a part of this long chain of history. And it's kind of my responsibility to take that baton and do something really special with it, which is part of why I love your foundation, because you're all about figuring out these ways of moving us forward. And I think when we look back in 5, 10, 15 years, my hope is that a lot of other designers recognize what we've known all along, which is that there's not only incredible talent within our company, but there is also a marketplace for what we can produce. And that makes it all kind of come full circle.
Thank you. David, you specialize in studying the intersection of art and identity. Can you talk to us a bit around what moments like this mean for your students as they're getting ready to enter into their adulthood and their lives?
Yeah, I think, to see yourself, to see versions of yourself out there in the popular space is so important. It affirms. One of the things that I think is so cool is obviously, like Cole said, there's some models that are sprinkled in the line, but there are students in there, there are real life folks. And so there's a psychology major who's in there. And so, we were talking this morning, I'm a chair of the psychology department this year. And, I was asking the gentleman if he'd looked at the previous documentary and what does it mean for him to be in this space and representing for a college, but also for a group of people who oftentimes go ignored, Black men in affirming healthy spaces. He's like, I really haven't looked at that. And I said, wait, hold on. He said, it's time to do the work, right? And so matching the work with the product is so important. So being able to engender within our young people who are looking at these things and being able to say, okay, the good work pays out. If you want to see yourself in these spaces, if you want to be considered in these healthy spaces, then do the work. I was doing a little bit of kind of research preparing for this and looking at the first line, and there was an interview that Dara and James had done, and folks were saying, this is just, it's like lightning struck, and you guys just came up, and you came out of nowhere. And James, as he does very diplomatically and kindly, said, no, man, I've been at this for years. Look at Dara Douglas's CV. She's been doing this for years. We've been at Polo for over a decade. And then before that, we were doing the work. So for folks to see this, right, these beautiful images of us, for them to see that work is a part of this is so important. So for my students, to see themselves in these beautiful spaces is important, but it's also important for them to understand the work that's tethered to it. And I think that's something, that I think is so important to communicate is, again, we talk about these safe spaces, these protected spaces, these spaces to just be, that many people do not have the privilege to be a part of and connected to. And so because of that, if we are privileged enough to be in these spaces, what are our responsibilities when we go back to the quote unquote real world, right? We can have fun and we can certainly celebrate ourselves and look fly and all that kind of stuff, but what are we taking back to the world? When Adam Clayton Powell came up here, when Bell Hooks came up here, when Martin Luther King Jr. came up here, certainly they had spaces where they could just be, but they went back to do the work. And so as I'm teaching at Morehouse College and hopefully, able to, Dr. Sheftall lets me go over to Spelman's campus and stuff like that as I go to Spelman, what is the type of work that needs to be done in those spaces? And I shout her out because I'm always learning from Dr. Sheftall, who's right here, right? She gets applause, Dr. Beverly Jarrett.
We're coming to the end because we're running out of time, but I don't want to walk away without asking you a question, James. And that really is, what do you hope people take away from this story, this moment, and this time?
Yeah, I think fundamentally, I want people to take away the fact that this is really just a story about, Shared Cottage. It's a story about Lee Van Allen and this idea that Charles Scher was born into slavery, went to an HBCU in Virginia, moved to Martha's Vineyard, opened up a business, and really planted a seed to grow a community. I think this is really a story about Jocelyn Coleman, whose grandmother purchased a house in the early 1900s, who was thinking about a great-great-grandchild that had not been born yet, who today always will have a place to call home. I think this is about Joyce Graves, who, as we think about the images and the legacy of her family in this photo, we think about cultural preservation and how important it is for others to be exposed to these images because you can't be what you can't see. And we talk a lot about how exposure leads to expansion, and the goal is that we expose so many people to these stories so that they realize that this really is a part of our collective legacy. I also think, just fundamentally speaking, especially in this time, it really takes a corporation that cares about these kind of things to actually get this over the board. This is a moment where we could have put this on the shelf and said, let's wait until things cool off and we can, get back to this in a few years. But it really takes an incredible leadership team behind this to have the resources, to have the team, to really commit to this and invest in this, to actually make this possible. And so I feel so lucky to be able to sit on the stage and talk about this, but there's an incredible team behind the scenes that's actually making this happen. And a lot of mentors, I think about Roseanne, I think about Maurice, I think about Sharonda, all the folks in this room who, when I'm not in the room, is speaking on my behalf about making sure that this gets across the line. I just want to let folks know that there's organizational excellence from a corporate perspective that makes this happen, but fundamentally, it's really about these incredible stories and families that without them, we wouldn't be here today. So I'm just so honored and blessed to be a vehicle, and the team that we have. Cole has been such a partner. He started as a partner and grown into a friend, and we've learned so much about this island through him and his partnerships and friendships, and I can't wait to come back up next summer and just hang out and just be. So thank you.
Thank you. So, because I'm the moderator and I have the mic, I'm going to take some privilege and ask a final question of all of you. Can you tell us something that you want each member in this room to take and do as actionable around the story of our narrative and our legacy? What's the one thing you would ask folks to do? And anyone can start.
I'll try. I think that there's when I think about experiencing this space that, as has been said on this stage many times, is so special, I think of a dual mandate, if you will. I think one is, as James said a second ago, it took remarkable foresight and intentionality for the ancestors of some of the people in this room to ensure that their descendants would be sitting here today. That did not happen by accident. And I think the same degree of intentionality is required to ensure that we preserve what happens here. And that, that is from both the storytelling, but also the property ownership. I mean, just think about someone in 1900 buying a house, trying to ensure that their great-grandchild would have that house to sleep in. I think that we could use some of that at times. And then secondly, while we are preserving this thing, we must also be welcoming to those who are coming in to add to it. I think that sometimes we get knocked, as my brother Dr. Rice was saying a moment ago, for being sort of exclusionary, and that is not the spirit of this place. And while we preserve what it is, we must also welcome what it could and will and should be. So that's how I think about it.
Thank you.
I'll go next. I think, one of the things that I would charge or implore people to do is kind of connected to what it is that Cole talked about, is how can you, within your discipline or within your comfort, how can you represent for your community and push toward a greater good? That's kind of what a mandate is of the historically Black colleges and universities that we come from, is you're coming into these spaces to learn and to work on yourself. But it's working on yourself to benefit the community that you come from and that holds you up. And I think that, one of the reasons that I am so happy to be attached to this campaign is because of James Jeter, right? He represents for Morehouse College, for Spelman, for the HBCUs that are out there, what it is that we want our students to do. How is it that you occupy your discipline in fashion and do some work that has to do with social justice, social impact, and broadening the narrative and complicating who it is and how it is that we're understand as Black folk? I mean, you're not supposed to be able to do that. You're just supposed to wear teddy bears on your shirt and stuff like that, right? So I think the thing that we can do is figure out how is it within the spaces that we feel comfortable and that we feel expert, how is it that we lean into community and push us forward to greater goodness?
Thank you.
I would love. I think it would be great for Valerie to end. So I will go. Yeah, I think just piggybacking off of Dr. Rice, I did feel interesting kind of going into a fashion world with all my friends going into, law or medicine, and I'm like, oh, all of these folks are changing the world, and I'm, making teddy bear sweaters, as he said. But I would just implore folks to tell your story, no matter where you are, no matter where you sit, because you just never know who it will touch, and even if it's one person, even if it's through fashion, even if it does start a conversation, I think that is the ultimate goal. I mean, the fact that a fashion brand can start a conversation like we did about identity, about classism, about elitism, and it just came through a fashion collection, just tells you that no matter what discipline you're in, you have the ability to make impact, and at least to start the important conversations that we need to be having. So tell your story.
Thank you.
I like that a lot. So I think we're all excellent, or we wouldn't be here. We're all privileged, or we wouldn't be here. And we tend to all look forward and what are we going to do with our lives? And I think part of what this entire experience has taught me, watching Ralph Lauren lead by example, is that we also have a responsibility to lift up other people, and that by doing so, we're not doing it out of benevolence. We're doing it because it's making us better. I mean, what James and Dara and everyone else did through these two collections makes the Ralph Lauren Corporation a better corporation. And it expands our reach, and it expands the way that people look at what it might mean to lead a better life. And so as you go back to your lives, I would hope that you will think about what can I do within my world to just build upon it and make it so much better than it is today. I mean, this did not exist until it was created by James and Dara. This was nothing, right? You took something, you took an incredible brand, you took a great platform, you worked for an amazing chairman, but you not only, well, maybe I should say this, if you all think this was easy, it was not. It was hard. And what I think James and Dara realized is that they knew something that other people in the company did not know. And they had enough confidence in their own voices to push and to demand that it be as excellent as it is. Because it could have been a weak tea version of this if they had let it, right? And you would not let it be. And I know because I got picked up on some of those conversations where they're like, no. And just like you said, I can't come up on this island and produce something that is not excellent. And excellence takes hard work. And so go back in your own networks and find who is that person in your network who is truly excellent and is prepared to do the work the way these guys and gals did the work, and then lift them up.
Thank you. So can we give another round of applause to our panelists? We've touched on a number of themes today, and I encourage you to continue thinking about what it means to decolonize our imagination, what it means to live into our Black excellence, what it means to live into our Black legacy, and most importantly, what it means to live into our Black joy. And if you're interested in continuing the conversation around racial equity and racial healing, we invite you to visit dayofracialhealing.org, which is a WKKF tool that really talks about how do you have these hard conversations so that you can continue to find ways in which to uplift communities, but most importantly for us to see our common humanity with folks who don't always look like us, experience life the way in which we do, and most importantly, who don't always speak our language. And so we encourage you to continue this conversation. And on a personal note, I want to thank the families of Oak Bluffs for creating this space and really sharing your joy and your legacy and your history and your narratives, because it's inspiring other communities to do the same. And as a wife and a mother, and my 8-year-old is here with me today, having him experience this is beyond imagination. So thank you all, and we encourage you to stay around, mingle, talk to the panelists, drink some of Ralph's coffee. And again, thank you for sharing this time and space with us. It has been an honor and a privilege. Enjoy the rest of your day.